Considering there is only 4 chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen remaining, I'm sure most of you are very surprised to see a new Gojo revival theory popping up in your feed. Now, if you are one of those people who get very angry and red in the face at the idea of someone thinking something different to you, then I recommend simply not watching the video, because this video is exactly what the title suggests, a theory about the return of Satoru Gojo. Simple as that. Well, I mean, I say simple as that, but there is a slight twist, because it actually is not a copium-driven theory at all. It's quite the opposite. Ever since Yuta took over Gojo's body, I had completely lost faith in Gojo returning. At least that was until I started noticing things which actually suggest it's even more likely than before. Now, many people think Gojo's return would be terrible writing, but this particular theory not only fixes that, but it could potentially make the writing even better. The twist, though, is that I desperately hope my theory is wrong. If the ending plays out how I predict, then I will accept it and probably really like it. But for reasons that I'll explain later on, everybody should be hoping that I am dead wrong. And let's be honest, you guys are pretty damn good at that, so it shouldn't really be that hard for you. Anyway, enough yapping, let's just get right into it. Now, before Yuta taking over Gojo's body was revealed, I was decently strong supporter of the Gojo revival movement, and even made a few theories of my own. And in all of my theories, I have always said that the main reason I believed Gojo would return is because Sukuna didn't go for the head. I simply could not get my own head around the fact that Gege made a huge point about how Toji should have taken off Gojo's head to stop him from healing. Toji not going for his head then lead to Gojo's awakening and all the impactful events that followed. And yet for some reason, Gege decided to make Sukuna slice him in half rather than aiming a tiny weeny bit higher and decapitating him. To me, it just felt way too deliberate of a decision, and it was the main reason that I thought Gojo was sure to return. And I was right, kind of, sort of. Okay, not really, but I was close enough. It turned out that Sukuna not decapitating Gojo was a deliberate choice, but it was so that Yuta could return in Gojo's body, not Gojo himself returning. And this event basically debunked my entire reasoning for thinking that Gojo would live. I mean, sure, there was loads of other reasons, but most of them went down the drain after seeing Yuta reveal himself in Gojo's body. Basically, I just completely lost hope and came to accept that he was gone. Ever since the recent chapters though, and creating my own theory about JJK's ending, I have found a new hope for Gojo's return. Now, I'm hoping lots of you have seen the theory that I'm talking about already. However, since it's so crucial to explaining why I think Gojo can return and it's still being good writing, I will give an incredibly brief and simple recap as well as leave the video link in the description below. All you really need to know about it is that I think the merger will be used as a tool to remove cursed energy from the world. And I managed to deduce this outcome from a joke that Gojo made following Yuji's detention center ordeal, where he said that as a result of Yuji's revival being revealed to the students, the Jujutsu High students would cry of happiness, someone would throw up, and in the end it would even lead to global warming being solved. And just as I predicted in that video, these events have slowly started happening in real time, what with Sukuna throwing up his fingers, and with Yuji crying out of happiness of seeing Megumi and Nobara. If you want to know how the fuck I managed to bring global warming into it, then I recommend simply watching the video, because that specific detail isn't really too important here. But the general point I'm trying to make is that I made a theory where I said the merger will be used as a tool to remove cursed energy from the world, and my theory for why is already slowly coming true, which means that it's looking good. So all I want you to do is continue through the video with the assumption that Megumi will use the merger as a tool to remove cursed energy from the world somehow. Okay, with that all cleared up, I think it's finally time to talk about the man himself, Satoru Gojo. Now, anytime Gojo revival conversations come up, there are always 4 sides that are taken: the brainless glazers, the brainless haters, the intelligent glazers, and the intelligent haters. Whenever a revival theory is suggested, the intelligent haters will make a genuinely valid point of how it would majorly disrupt his writing and also the writing of his students. And then the brainless haters tend to just copy this point to try and make themselves look smart, but then they often just embarrass themselves. So that's not important. Some of you are just dumb, okay? All in all though, I do agree with the argument that Gojo returning in all his Six Eyes limitless glory would completely overshadow the theme of pushing the new generation to surpass him and live the life that he could never live. Gojo as a character is probably one of, if not the best thing that Gege has written from the beginning all the way to his perfect yet tragic ending. And I think bringing him back as the strongest would absolutely undermine all of that writing. However, what if instead of returning as the strongest, he simply returned as Satoru Gojo? I mean, think about it. Even after Gojo died, the people around him still did not understand him, as demonstrated by Nanami in the airport. I mean, sure, Yuta Okotu was able to understand him in the sense that he could acknowledge Gojo's isolation, but that doesn't necessarily mean he could put himself in Gojo's shoes and actually empathize. I mean, in Gojo's own words, they were all still flowers who Gojo said were capable of appreciating him, but not truly understanding him. And that's why he was so keen to reach out to Sukuna, because Sukuna was someone he knew was actually capable of understanding understanding and empathizing with this isolation. Or at least he would be capable of empathizing if he wasn't a raging psychopath gremlin monster. The point is that Gojo's story is incredible, and that feeling of isolation still followed him to the grave, and I think he deserves better. So my question to you now is, do you think Gojo's return would still be bad writing if cursed energy is completely eradicated from the world? Because I think it would actually be very good writing, if executed correctly. He would simply return as Satoru Gojo, not the strongest, not the greatest Six Eyes Limitless user in history, not the head of the Gojo clan. He would just be a regular man who needs to get on with his life. And I think him returning as nothing more than a normal man would mean that those who love him would love him for who he is instead of his strength. And again, assuming it is Megumi that uses the merger to eradicate cursed energy, it would mean that the combined efforts of his students and Megumi is what actually saved him from that isolation. Gojo dedicated himself to raising the new generation so that none of them would suffer like he had, so I think it would be perfect if his students return the favor by saving him from said suffering. However, just because this scenario means that Gojo's return can actually be good writing, it doesn't really explain how he would come back to life in the first place, which is what we're gonna discuss now. So, following the reveal of Yuta in Gojo's body, the crazed Gojo Glazers got to work and started crafting new ways for Gojo to return. And most of them are complete copium, but occasionally I will come across one that actually makes sense. Now, we actually have very little certainty about how the soul and the body actually interact, since different sorcerers and different techniques all have different rules. When Geto resisted against Kenjaku, Kenjaku concluded that the body and the soul are one, basically meaning that if Geto's body is alive, then so is his soul. However, Mahito's ideology and his curse technique believes a different set of rules where the soul comes first and its shape always determines the shape of the body. And then we have Wee who can straight up replace a body's soul with a completely different one without the shape changing at all. The idea is, even if there is a definitive set of rules, we simply don't know what they are, and it doesn't seem like anyone else does either. So we have to assume that the rules vary with each sorcerer and each technique. And since we've seen how the body and soul interact with the body swap technique, many people think that there's a chance Gojo's soul lives because his body lives. Now, for reasons I have explained in many videos before, I think Yuta is currently returning to his original body, which begs the question of what will happen to Gojo's body once Yuta moves out. Despite Gojo's body being brainless once Yuta moves out, many people think that Gojo's soul will take over and he will live, but obviously not having a brain is a very important issue that we shouldn't just ignore for the sake of copium. However, I came up with a solution to this problem which makes this soul theory somewhat viable. Since Yuta is conscious, it means that he isn't dead and can potentially make it back to his own body. What's very interesting though is that Shoko has stitched up Yuta's body in anticipation of his return, but for some reason she's also stitched his skull back on. I mean, if you plan on moving Yuta's brain back over, then why would you close that up, you know? Unless it's not her intention to move Yuta's brain back to his body at all. My theory is that she placed Yuta's brain in Gojo's body, and then she also placed Gojo's brain in Yuta's body. And then instead of swapping the brains back again using the burnt out body swap technique, what if Wee simply swapped Yuta's soul back into his original body? Gojo's body is then left with Gojo's soul and Yuta's brain, and Yuta's body is left with Yuta's soul and Gojo's brain. From what we've been told though, Wee can actually open the metaphorical box of the body and allow the body to take the shape of the soul inhabiting it, meaning that the brain in Gojo's body will once again become Gojo's and Yuta's will once again become Yuta's. And thanks to Yuta, Gojo's body is all healed up, meaning that if the theory of the soul and body being one is true, Gojo should just be alive with no resistance from any competing souls. This theory would also add a lot of weight to Yuta's whole monster speech, because it would mean that Yuta's understanding of Gojo and choice to take his body is what actually ended up saving Gojo's life from the lonely death that he had. Now, don't get me wrong, there are lots of other theories, like cursed corpse theories, that I simply don't like, so I'm just not going to talk about them. I'm going to keep it completely real with you guys though. I do not think this whole soul swap resurrection theory is actually realistic at all. I just made it for fun. If Gege does want to revive Gojo, then he will find a way to do it, but I don't think it will be this way. In fact, I don't think it will be in a way that any of us can predict at all, and it will probably be quite underwhelming, to be honest. I basically just made this soul theory for fun. Simple as that. The main purpose of this video was never to seriously discuss how Gojo can return. Its main purpose was exploring why his return can actually be good writing if he returns to a world without cursed energy or jujutsu. And with my previous theories on JJK's ending, I think a world without jujutsu is exactly where we're heading. Just before explaining why I desperately hope my theories are wrong though, I wanted to quickly touch on something a lot of you mentioned in my previous comment sections. There is supposedly this Gege statement floating around where he apparently says either Yuji will live or Yuji will die and everyone else will live. Now I'm gonna keep this very brief. I have never been able to find proof of this this statement. B, I have heard many people say that it's either fake or a terrible mistranslation. And C, I know to take anything the writer says with a pinch of salt because anything can change, and I recommend you do the same. I mean, sure, at the rate we're going, it could most definitely be true, and that's possibly how we're going to end. But I will not ever take a dodgy statement like this as a certified fact when making my theories. I just wanted to make that known. Alright, now it's time for the big twist that I mentioned in the intro. As you should hopefully understand by now, my reason for thinking that Gojo can return is very closely tied to my theory about JJK's ending. And again, I'll leave a link to that full cursed energy removal theory in the description below. You see, I genuinely believe that the theory makes sense because it very nicely ties up the merger and the theme of cursed energy being the root of all of JJK's problems. It is simply a great ending to tie everything together with some incredible foreshadowing spanning all the way back to the beginning of the story. All of the pieces have started coming together too perfectly, but dear God, do I hope that I'm wrong, and you should too. My reason for thinking this is incredibly simple. If the merger and cursed energy is all concluded and resolved, then it makes one thing abundantly clear. It means there would be no hope for a Jujutsu Kaisen sequel. I mean, sure, we could still get a Heian Era or Kenjaku focused prequel, but that does mean that we are never going to see our favorite modern day sorcerers again like Yuji, Nobara, Todo, Megumi, or Yuta. If my theory is correct, then Jujutsu Kaisen is over. So please, pray Gege leaves the merger open-ended, because then Jujutsu Kaisen Part 2 is a real possibility. Anyway, that does it for what could be my final Jujutsu Kaisen theory, but no promises because you never know what's coming. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, feel free to join the Discord and follow me on Twitter, links below. I will see you very soon for some non-JJK content like One Piece and Kagurabachi, so if you're interested in those stories, then please make sure to stay tuned into the channel. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing all of the hate comments. I will catch you in a bit.